AWS Cloud9 Introduction and Tutorial. Cloud9 is a cloud-based integrated development environment or IDE. Here you can write, run and debug your code in browser. It includes a code editor, debugger and terminal. It comes pre-packaged with essentials like AWS CLI and tooling for over 40 programming languages. You can also share your development environment with your team for easy code reviews and pair programming. It uses an EC2 instance as underlying host. There is no charge for IDE. You're only charged for things like the EC2 instance and storage. Cloud9 instance can be automatically hibernated when not in use, thus saving cost. And it allows you access to the host EC2 instance. You have terminal sudo privileges to the underlying EC2 host. It comes with pre-authenticated AWS CLI. You can easily create serverless applications and locally develop, test, and debug AWS Lambda functions. With this background, let's begin by creating Cloud9 environment. We are in AWS console Cloud9 section. Let's hit create environment and provide a environment name. Let's call it work env, and we will choose new EC2 instance, and the instance type we will use will be t2.micro. And as you can see, you have the option of selecting a larger instance type depending on your needs. Platform will be Amazon Linux 2 and timeout will be 30 minutes. And timeout means how long Cloud9 can be inactive before auto hibernating. And we will leave network settings as default. So the environment is accessed via SSM or VPC settings. We'll leave that as default and we are ready to create. So this will take a short while. So let's head over to AWS EC2 section. And here let's see whether there are any instances being created. Yes, and there you can see there is an EC2 instance being provisioned. And now we are in CloudFormation stacks screen. A new stack has been created here. Let's look at the details. If you go under resources, you can see instance and instance security group. You can also take a look at the template that has been generated. Okay, now let's go back to our Cloud9 dashboard. So you can see the message at the top, successfully created our environment. Now that our environment is created, let's launch the IDE. Here we can click on the open link to launch the IDE. So the IDE is opening. Let's wait for it. And that's our IDE, right? Looks very much like any other standard IDE. At the bottom, you can see a shell or a terminal. So let's see what is there. First, let us check AWS CLI. So we have it here, AWS CLI, and let's check Git. Okay. Let's try another AWS CLI command. Okay, so all those things work on expected lines. Clear that, and let's see Java version and try Python. So as you can see, this comes with a lot of pre-packaged tooling. Let's write a simple program, a Python program, to check out various features of the IDE. Right. So let's select file, new file from template. Let's choose Python file. Okay. And we'll create a very simple program. And then later on we will run and debug this program. and let's just print that number. So the sum is, and the number. Okay, and let's save that. So we are saving it to the default environment directory. Let's give this file a name. Okay, save it, and now we are ready to run. Right? So you can see the result at the bottom. So this is pretty standard stuff, and there you can see the runners, and you can change the runner if you need to. Now let's see how we can debug this thing. Add a breakpoint, click on the debug section where you have plenty of debug related options, and click the debug icon to enable debugging, right? And now we can hit run. So as expected, the program pauses at the breakpoint. And here we could do all the usual debug related things like examining variables and so on. Okay, yeah, let's step over the thing. The debug window has all the usual things that you would expect to see. Okay, let's run. And the program continues. Let's explore the IDE a little more. So on the top, we have various menu items and things like file, edit, find, view, go, run, etc. Tools window and so on. And on the right hand side, we have some additional options. So this one is with respect to collaboration, and if you are sharing your environment with another user, so you will be looking at that. And that's the outline section for any files that you have opened, and that's the debug section. And we have these options on the left hand side. So the first one shows our home directory, and we have the options with respect to source control. And that's the AWS Explorer. And you can expand the region and look at various services available. So for example, if you expand Lambda, you can see what Lambda functions you have. And similarly for S3, shows you your buckets. And on the top right, you have settings. So a variety of settings here. Okay, let's look at themes, and let's change our theme. So you can set your preferences and so on here. Next, let us create, deploy, and invoke a Lambda function. Before we create a Lambda function, let us go to AWS console Lambda section to see what functions we already have. So we have one function here. However, let us create a new Lambda function. So let's select that AWS icon, expand the Explorer, go to the Lambda node, right click there, create Lambda SAM application. Select a Python version, select a template, select folder, name of our application, and let's wait. So our SAM application has been created. Okay, let's take a look at our application. Expand that node, and here is our Lambda Python file. Make any changes you want to it, save it, and now we can deploy. And here under Lambda, we'll write and deploy SAM application. Choose the template in the SAM application. So here we will provide an S3 bucket to deploy code to. Okay, we'll use that as our bucket name. However, we need to create that bucket first. So let's hit that plus icon at the top. Give the bucket name. Hit enter. Give a name for the cloud formation stack. Okay, we will use that stack name and hit enter. And let's wait for the function to be deployed. Okay, so resource creation is going, and now deployment succeeded. That's our new Lambda function, and which we will try to invoke. But before that, let us go to AWS console Lambda section and refresh that. And that's our new Lambda function. Let's click on that. And let's look at all the details here. That's our code with the changes we had made. Everything looks good. Yeah, let's go back to our IDE and right click on that and select Invoke on AWS. And here we have the option to provide a payload if you want to. Let's hit Invoke. And there you have the result from the Lambda function. Let's look at what supporting artifacts were created during the deployment of Lambda function. So let's go to Cloud Formation, and here you can see the stack. This is the same stack name that we had given earlier. So let's take a look. And here under resources, you can find related resources created by the stack. And under template, you can see the generated template. Now let us go to S3. Here we should check the bucket for the Lambda code. And that's our bucket and the files under it. Next, let us download an existing Lambda function, make changes to it, upload it, and invoke it. Let's download this Lambda function by right-clicking and choosing download option. Let's choose the workspace folder. And now the download is complete. Let's go to the workspace folder and you can see it here. Let's expand that. And that's a Lambda code. Let's make some changes to it. Okay. And then let's save it. And now we are ready to upload it. Let's choose that option. Select the region, function name, choose yes, and it's done. Uploaded Lambda function. Let's check that in AWS console under Lambda function section. We select the function name and look at the code source, and there you can see the changes we made are here deployed. Okay, let's go back to our IDE and choose the AWS Explorer, our Lambda function, and invoke on AWS. We can supply a payload if we want to, and then hit invoke. And there we have the response from our Lambda function. Now we will take a look at how to debug a Lambda function in the IDE. So to begin with, let us select the Lambda function that we want to debug. Okay. So that's the Lambda function we want to debug. And We will remove all this unnecessary stuff. Just clean it up a bit. Okay. And modify it a little. Give that a value. All right. And make that change. Okay. Now let's add a breakpoint. Okay. Go to AWS Explorer. Select Edit SAM Debug Configuration. And this window will open. Okay. Let's choose Load Existing Config. Essentially, you should update this config correctly. So invoke target type template, path to the template file in your application, and you can add a payload if you want to. Okay. Let's take a quick look at this template file. So that's our template file. Let's open that and note that resource name. This is the resource name we have in our debug configuration right there. Okay, let's invoke and wait for the program to pause at the breakpoint. Right, and you can see the debug section has opened up, and here on you can debug as usual. So this is how we debug our Lambda function within our IDE. Let's continue. And there you can see the response from the Lambda function. Next, let us look at how to collaborate with other users or developers using Cloud9. In order to share our environment, we will select the share button at top right, provide IAM username of a user in our account, and then provide read or read write permissions, and then hit the invite button. Okay, and now select and copy the environment URL. The second user could use this URL to access the environment. On another browser, I'm logged in as second user, and then I use this URL to open the IDE and waiting for it to open. So here's the IDE that I see as a second user, and it looks very similar to what the first user had. The same environment directory and file is visible. And on top right, we can see the users that are online. And via the group chat, let me send some messages. So in the text box at bottom right, I'm just typing some messages. Good to collaborate. And now let us make some changes to the code. Okay, so any changes that I make to the code as the second user will be visible to the first user in real time. Right? Okay. All right. So now we can go back to the first user screen, and here we see the changes made by the second user. And under group chat, we can see that there are new messages for us, so we can respond to them. Nice, welcome. Okay, and we notice some errors, so we send a message. There is an error here, and let me correct that. Okay, so let's go back to the code and make some changes. Okay, so now the error should be gone. All right, so we send a message, please review now. And let's adjust this browser windows so that you can see both the users IDs side by side. Remember that this is just a demo. Don't use a root user for your day-to-day activities. Okay, now as a second user, let's make one final change and then go back to the first user's screen and let's restore the full screen mode. And now to unshare, delete the user and hit done. So with that, we come to the end of our introduction and demo of AWS Cloud9.